There's power in the factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in our union. Now the lessons of the past are all learned with workers' blood.
Hello everyone, welcome to the April 4th Coalition Show. This is the May 18th, 2026 edition of the show. We're entering into Memorial Day weekend coming up next week on Monday. So I thought that we'd sort of focus on Memorial Day and try to bring some light to it, or try to educate myself a little bit about the Civil War and about what brought it about and what it was like, some of the speeches from that area. So the April 4th Coalition mission statement is, we are for workers' rights, collective bargaining rights, and are against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. We endorse all the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but as our custom is to put emphasis on Article 13. Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment. Number 2, everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work. Number 3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for him or herself or his or her family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. And number 4, everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his or her interests. So Memorial Day, the memories that I have as a kid, we were all marched down. I lived on Furnace Street, so we'd walk over the footbridge and stand on West Main Street, and the marchers would march up Main Street, up West Main Street, and down to the Hillside Cemetery, where the Gettysburg Address would be recited by an 8th grader who got the Angeli Award, named after Officer Angeli, who was killed in the line of duty here in North Adams. And there were other speeches, and the jury band would play. It was a very short parade compared to the fall foliage parade, but our mother would make sure that we'd always go there and we'd have a flag to hold. So I'd like to show a video that more or less covers the Gettysburg Address, and just as a foundation, because it seems like, you know, the Gettysburg Address was built off of the Declaration of Independence, that spiritual part of our documents that we're talking about human rights and the need for equality and freedom. So let's hear the Civil War in color, description of the Gettysburg Address.
Thursday, November 19th, 1863. Before an estimated 15,000 spectators, President Abraham Lincoln dedicates a new Soldiers' National Cemetery at Gettysburg. In a few moments, he will deliver words that he hopes will guide the Union through the war and start the process of healing.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
Lincoln knew he had to raise the stakes of this thing, or else they'd stop. He knew he had to raise the stakes morally, and that's what the Gettysburg Address is about.
That from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause, for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain.
That short speech of 273 words became one of the most famous speeches in all of American history. Lincoln knew that we must prevail in this war if we are going to remain America.
That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Hi, I was looking at a book I have on my bookshelf at home. It's called American Political Tradition by Richard Hofstadter. He's a very well-regarded historian. And he talked a little bit about what the abolitionists were. You know, the abolitionist movement was based upon a moral frenzy, not an economic discontent. After about 1830, almost all abolitionists were residents in the North. For the most part, they were middle-class people who had no material stake in the conservation or the destruction of the slave system, which was, in the most literal sense, none of their business. Since slavery was a moral offense rather than an economic injury to them, they came to look upon it not as an economic institution, but a breach of the ordinations of God. Abolitionists was a religious movement emerging from the fervent of evangelical Protestantism, psychologically akin to other reforms, women's rights, temperance, pacifism, which agitated the spirit of the northern middle classes during the 3 decades before the Civil War. Its philosophy was essentially a theology, its techniques similar to the techniques of revivalism, its agency, the church congregations of the towns. Our enterprise, declared Phillips, is eminently a religious one, dependent for the success entirely on the religious sentiment of the people. So it was, something that was very faith-based, and I just, when he talked about the abolitionists, a lot of them were white middle-class people in the North who had not a lot of contact with slaves, but some. Some of the slaves that we've come in contact with through history is Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. So I'd like to, and also, John Brown, who more or less tried to instigate the whole freedom of the slaves. So I want to take a look at Harriet Tubman, and I have a couple of videos here, and the first one is Harriet Tubman's rescue.
As one of the most well-known conductors of the Underground Railroad, Harriet Tubman rescued more than 300 slaves over the span of 11 years.
Harriet Tubman was one of the most remarkable women in American history.
Born a slave in the early 1820s, Araminta Ross changed her name to Harriet Tubman after marrying a free black man named John Tubman around 1844.
As a slave, Harriet Tubman was repeatedly whipped. She also later was hit by a lead weight mistakenly, but that lead weight caused her to experience narcolepsy for the rest of her life.
Fearing that she would be sold away from her family in 1849, Tubman fled to Philadelphia using an informal but well-organized network known as the Underground Railroad.
She felt that she would be sold away because she was viewed as a sickly person. She and 2 of her brothers ran away, and the brothers decided they would return to the plantation. And she, instead of abandoning them, turned around, went back with them to the plantation, and then turned around and escaped a second time by herself.
Using her own money, Tubman made separate journeys to rescue her sister and brother. And in 1851, Tubman guided a group of 11 fugitives north, earning her the nickname Moses.
Harriet Tubman was called the Moses of her people, largely because she was so successful in leading slaves out of slavery, out of the South, into the North, which symbolically is known as the Promised Land. Moses, the figure from the Bible, leading his chosen people, Tubman took on that kind of mythic quality.
In 1858, Tubman assisted abolitionist John Brown in recruiting men for the raid on Harper's Ferry. During the Civil War, Tubman became a Union Army scout, a nurse, and led an armed expedition to liberate more than 700 slaves.
Harriet Tubman was an incredibly brave African-American woman. She sacrificed her own life, and she freed probably over 1,000 people. And she said she could have freed a lot more if they had known they actually were slaves.
Although Tubman was widely well-respected during her lifetime, she was impoverished and died of pneumonia in 1913. Tubman was buried with military honors and was later named an American hero by President Barack Obama.
Harriet Tubman is one of the amazing women in history. She not only brought these slaves out, but she never lost a life.
Yeah, that was it's quite a life that she kept returning and leading her people north. There's another video that I wanted to show about her courage of Harriet Tubman.
Escaping slavery, risking everything to save her family, leading a military raid, championing the cause of women's suffrage. These are just a handful of the accomplishments of one of America's most courageous heroes. Harriet Tubman was born Araminta Ross in Dorchester County, Maryland, in the early 1820s. Born into chattel slavery, Araminta, or Minty, was the fifth of 9 children. 2 of Minty's older sisters were sold to a chain gang. Even as a small child, Minty was hired out to different owners who subjected her to whippings and punishment. Young Minty's life changed forever on an errand to a neighborhood store. There, an overseer threw a 2-pound weight at a fugitive enslaved person, missed, and struck Minty instead. Her injury caused her to experience sleeping spells, which we know of today as narcolepsy, for the rest of her life. Minty's owner tried to sell her, but there were no buyers for an enslaved person who fell into sleeping spells. She was instead put to work with her father, Ben Ross, who taught her how to lumber. Lumbering increased Minty's physical strength and put her in touch with free black sailors who shipped the wood to the north. From them, Minty learned about the secret communications that occurred along trade routes, information that would prove invaluable later in her life. In this mixed atmosphere of free and enslaved blacks working side by side, Minty met John Tubman, a free black man she married in 1844. After marriage, she renamed herself Harriet after her mother. Harriet Tubman's owner died in 1849. When his widow planned to sell off her enslaved human beings, Harriet feared she would be sold away from everyone she loved. She had heard of an underground railroad, a secret network of safe houses, boat captains, and wagon drivers willing to harbor fugitive enslaved people on their way north. So Tubman fled with 2 of her brothers, Ben and Harry. They eventually turned back, fearing they were lost. But in one of her sleeping spells, Harriet dreamed that she could fly like a bird. Looking down below, she saw the path to liberation, and in the autumn of 1849, she set out on her own, following the North Star to Pennsylvania and to freedom. Tubman returned to the South 13 times to free her niece, brothers, parents, and many others. She earned the nickname Black Moses and worked diligently with fellow abolitionists to help enslaved people escape, first to the North and later to Canada. Harriet Tubman worked as a Union Army nurse, scout, and spy during the Civil War. In 1863, she became the first woman in United States history to plan and lead a military raid, liberating nearly 700 enslaved persons in South Carolina. After the war, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution legally abolished slavery, while the 14th expanded citizenship and the 15th gave voting rights to formerly enslaved black men. But she was undaunted, and she persisted. She raised funds for formerly enslaved persons and helped build schools and a hospital on their behalf. In 1888, Tubman became more active in the fight for women's right to vote. In 1896, she appeared at the founding convention of the National Association of Colored Women in Washington, D.C., and later at a women's suffrage meeting in Rochester, New York. There she told the audience, "I was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and I can say what many others cannot. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." As her fame grew, various friends and allies helped her in the fight to collect a veteran's pension for her service in the Union Army. In 1899, she was finally granted $20 a month. In a fitting twist of fate, the United States Treasury announced in 2016 that Tubman's image will appear on a redesigned $20 bill. Harriet Tubman died on March 10, 1913. Even on her deathbed at age 91, she kept the freedom of her people in mind. Her final words were, "I go away to prepare a place for you." If you're inspired by Harriet Tubman's life and work, we highly recommend the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Underground Railroad. This wildly inventive and courageous book follows protagonist Cora through the trials and horrors of escaping slavery in the South. You can download an audio version of the book for free at audible.com/TEDEd. Every free trial created encourages Audible to continue supporting TEDEd's nonprofit mission.
Well, I wanted to move from Harriet Tubman to another woman of history during the Civil War, Sojourner Truth. I didn't hear about her in school. It took a while for me to come across her work, but let's see the first video about Sojourner Truth in her electrifying speeches.
In early 1828, Sojourner Truth approached the grand jury of Kingston, New York. She had no experience with the legal system, no money, and no power in the eyes of the court. Ignoring the jury's scorn, Truth said she was there to fight for custody of her 5-year-old son, Peter, who'd been illegally sold to an enslaver in Alabama. As the trial played out over the next several months, Truth raised funds, strategized with lawyers, and held her faith. Finally, in the spring of 1828, Peter was returned to her care, but Truth's work was far from over. She would dedicate the rest of her life to pursuing justice and spiritual understanding. Truth was born into slavery as Isabella Baumfree in the late 18th century in Ulster County, New York. Although New York State had announced the abolition of slavery in 1799, the Emancipation Act was gradual. Those who were currently enslaved were forced to serve a period of indentured servitude until their mid-20s. Throughout this period, enslavers repeatedly sold Baumfree, tearing her from her loved ones. Often, she was explicitly prevented from pursuing new relationships. Eventually, she married an enslaved man named Thomas, with whom she had 3 children. She was desperate to keep her new family together, but the slow progress of abolition threatened this hope. Baumfree's enslaver, John Dumont, had promised to free her by 1826. When he failed to keep his word, Baumfree fled for her safety. During the escape, she was only able to rescue her youngest daughter, Sophia, while her other children remained in bondage. It would be 2 years before she regained custody of Peter. After that, she would wait another 2 years before she saw any of her other children. During this time, Baumfree found solace in her faith and became increasingly dedicated to religious reflection. After settling in Kingston, New York, she joined a Methodist community that shared her political views. She continued her practice of speaking aloud to God in private, and one night, her evening prayers took on even more sacred significance. Baumfree claimed to hear the voice of God, telling her to leave Kingston and share her holy message with others. Though she never learned to read or write, Baumfree became known as an electrifying orator whose speeches drew on biblical references, spiritual ideals, and her experience of slavery. Her sermons denounced the oppression of African Americans and women in general, and became prominent in campaigns for both abolition and women's rights. In 1843, she renamed herself Sojourner Truth and embarked on a legendary speaking tour. Truth saw her journey as a mission from God. Her faith often led her to the nation's most hostile regions, where she spoke to bigoted audiences as the only Black woman in the crowd. Truth was confident God would protect her, but some crowds responded to her bravery with violence. During one of her sermons, a mob of white men threatened to set fire to the tent where she was speaking. In her memoir, Truth recalled steeling herself to confront them. "Have I not faith enough to go out and quell that mob? I felt as if I had 3 hearts, and that they were so large my body could hardly hold them." She placated the men with song and prayer until they had no desire to harm her. Truth's speeches impacted thousands of people in communities across the nation, but her activism went far beyond public speaking. During the Civil War, she became involved with the Union Army, recruiting soldiers and organizing supplies for Black troops. Her work was so well regarded that she was invited to meet President Lincoln. She took the occasion to argue that all formerly enslaved people should be granted land by the government. Truth continued to travel and speak well into her 80s. Until her death in 1883, she remained an outspoken critic who fought for her right to be heard in a hostile world. As Truth once said, "I feel safe even in the midst of my enemies, for the truth is powerful and will prevail." For another account of an enslaved woman who laid her life on the line in the fight for freedom and justice, check out this video on the epic feats of Harriet Tubman, or learn more about the Women's Suffrage March of 1913, whose organizers were directly influenced by Truth's work.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Sojourner Truth, one of her most famous speeches is "Ain't I a Woman?" And we have a reenactment of it, and I'd like you to hear it.
1951, the Black abolitionist and former slave Sojourner Truth spoke to a gathering of feminists in Akron, Ohio. The spontaneous speech, only a few minutes long, was a landmark moment in feminist and abolitionist history.
Well, children, where there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that twixt the Negroes of the South and the women at the North all talking about rights, the white man gonna be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as any man when I could get it. And I could bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children, seen most sold off into slavery. And when I cried out with a mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? And they talk about this thing in the head. What is it they call it? Oh, that's right, yeah, intellect. That's it, honey. Well, what's that got to do with women's rights and Negroes' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? That man in the back there, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Well, where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? He came from God and a woman. Man didn't have nothing to do with it. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, well, these women here together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And they asking to do it. The men better let them.
Yes, that was quite a speech, memorable, you know. I want to shift gears to John Brown. In the same sort of setting, there's a reenactment of John Brown's last speech just before he was about to be put to death. Let's hear that speech by John Brown.
On October 16, 1859, John Brown and nearly 24 slaves seized the armory at Harper's Ferry in West Virginia, hoping to use its massive arsenal in the struggle to end slavery. Captured and brought to trial at nearby Charleston, Brown was found guilty of treason. 1 month before his execution, he addressed a courtroom in Charleston, West Virginia.
I have, may it please the court, a few words to say. In the first place, I deny everything but what I have all along admitted, the design on my part to free the slaves. I intended certainly to have made a clear thing of that matter, as I did last winter when I went into Missouri and there took slaves without the snapping of a gun on either side, moved them through the country, and finally left them in Canada. I designed to have done that same thing again on a larger scale. That was all I intended. I never intended murder, or treason, or destruction of property, or to excite or incite the slaves to rebellion or make insurrection. I have another objection, and that is, it is unjust that I should suffer such a penalty. Had I interfered in the manner which I admit, and which I admit has been fairly proved, had I so interfered in behalf of the rich, the powerful, the intelligent, the so-called great, or in behalf of any of their friends, either father, mother, brother, sister, wife, or children, or any of that class, and suffered and sacrificed what I have in this interference, it would have been all right. And every man in this courtroom would have deemed it an act worthy of reward rather than punishment. This court acknowledges, I suppose, the validity of the law of God. I see a book kissed here, which I suppose to be the Bible, or at least the New Testament. That teaches me that whatsoever I would that men should do to me, I should do even so to them. And it teaches me further to remember them that are in bonds as bound with them. I endeavored to act up to that instruction. Now, I say I am yet too young to understand that God is any respecter of persons. I believe that to have interfered, as I have done, as I have always freely admitted I have done, in behalf of his despised poor, was not wrong, but right. Now, if it is deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life for the furtherance of the ends of justice, and mingle my blood with the blood of my children, and with the blood of millions in this slave country, whose rights are disregarded by wicked, cruel, and unjust enactments, I submit, so let it be done.
Wow, those are some very powerful words. I mean, I never was exposed to that. Getting prepared for this show, that's when I came across it, that he said that, he admitted, yeah, I did everything that it was proven, that I did to free the slaves. He said, but, had it been a rich person that I sacrificed and tried to free, you would have been thanking me, or the rich person's family. It's what he called the despised poor that he was he was working on behalf, and that was the reason why he was put to death. Last week we talked a lot about the Battle Hymn of the Republic, the words written by Julia Ward Howe, and it alluded to the fact that there was a song called John Brown's Body that was being sung by the soldiers in the North, and then inspired Julia Ward Howe to write the Battle Hymn of the Republic. But I thought it'd be good if we played a version of John Brown's Body to close out this show. And then, so let's hear this song, John Brown's Body.
Old John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage who we ventured all to save. But though he lost his life while struggling for the slave, his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul is marching on. And John Brown was a hero, undaunted, true, and brave, and Kansas knows his valor when he fought her rights to save. Now though the grass grows green above his grave, his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul is marching on. He captured Harper's Ferry with his 19 men so few, and frightened old Virginia till she trembled through and through. They hung him for a traitor, they themselves the traitor crew. His soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul is marching on. John Brown was John the Baptist, of the Christ we are to see. Christ who of the bondsman shall the liberator be. And soon throughout the sunny South the slaves shall all be free. His soul is marching on. The conflict that he heralded, he looks up from heaven to view, on the army of the Union with its flag red, white, and blue. And heaven shall ring with anthems o'er the deed they mean to do. His soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul is marching on. Ye soldiers of freedom, then strike while strike ye may. The death blow of oppression is a better time and way. For the dawn of old John Brown is brightening today, and his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul is marching on. His soul is marching on.
Well, it was quite a thing that happened in this country, that Civil War. I mean, we're still feeling the reverberations of that Civil War right now. In doing the research for this, I was surprised to see that, according to this history book by Hofstadter, he makes a statement that in the British Empire, slavery had been abolished by law in 1833. So that was, almost 30 years before our Civil War. And I think slavery, I don't have the data in front of me, but I think slavery was also abolished in Mexico. And that's why Texas seceded from Mexico to establish its own country, because they did not want to give up the slaves. So in a way, America, the reckoning for the abolition of slavery, America was behind the times. And our whole Constitution was compromised a lot with the slave states, you know, to maintain slavery in order to maintain the Union. So when we celebrate Memorial Day, you know, we should reflect upon, you know, the battles that were fought for our freedom and the freedom for all people, no matter what their ethnic background. Similar to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you know, everyone, you know, is that you don't earn the human rights that every human being should have. It is something that you're endowed with. Just by being human, those rights have to be respected, and slavery is one of those rights. The abolition of slavery is listed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So also, what's in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is if I get this signed here, no one shall be subjected to torture or cruel or inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detainment, or exile. Article 14, everyone has the right to seek and enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. And then there are other international laws too that are agreed upon. The Geneva Conventions. It outlines the humanitarian treatment of prisoners of war, ensuring that they are treated humanely and their medical needs are met. Right now, in this country, we need to build community. I don't know if you can see that. We need to build community, not detention camps. We have detention camps were being built all over this country, and the people's basic human rights and their the Geneva Conventions are not being applied to these places. So just like on Memorial Day weekend, when we're thinking of that, we should think of the people that are being, whose rights are being deprived in this country for reasons, maybe because of the color of their skin or their origin, their country of origin. It doesn't matter where you come from, whether you're legal or illegal, as people say, if you're documented or undocumented. We've all heard the term WAP, when people, a degrading way of that was used against Italians. But what that stood for was without papers. This is being undocumented is nothing new. But if you don't have papers, that doesn't mean you sacrifice your humanity. You have basic human rights. Just like the Civil War was fought to free the slaves, every human being has certain inalienable rights, and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But then check out the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and make sure that international law is being upheld within our country on this Memorial Day weekend. I want to thank you for bearing with me. I'm sorry that I didn't have my other people here with me. I don't like doing the show alone, but I appreciate you being here. I hope you have a safe, healthy, and happy Memorial Day weekend, and you get a chance to pay respects to those that have passed before us and enjoy life with family and friends right now. So, power to the people.
Mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities and the farmlands to trenches full of mud. War has always been the bosses' way, sir. The Union forever defending our rights. Down with the black level workers unite. With our brothers and our sisters in many far off lands. There